Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another Real Vision Masterclass. I'm your host, Bijan Malecki, and today we're joined once again by Mauricio Di Bartolomeo, co-founder and chief strategy officer at Ledn. Mauricio, it's fantastic to have you back with us again. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, Bijan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We were talking offline and, I saw your jersey and, we had a great conversation. It's always a pleasure to have you back and have a chat with you about, I think a very important topic, which is, Bitcoin lending and, untapping this digital asset class that we have in front of us. So last time you joined us, of course, we did explore Bitcoin backed loans and Ledn's process. But for those of us that may have missed that episode, can you remind us of your background? You've got a really powerful origin story that I feel like is the essence of what crypto is about. So why don't you refresh our memories on your background?
Thanks, Bijan. Yeah, I'll give a quick summary. So, as you know, I was born and raised in Venezuela. A lot of my family, some of my family is still there, but it was through the process of the collapse of the country, hyperinflation, authoritarianism, that the country had installed some really nefarious capital controls that effectively forced people to hold this disintegrating currency, the Bolivar, and effectively force you into poverty if you just took it and held the Bolivares as they were uh, pretty much forcing you to do. So it was in this context that my family, my youngest brother, actually starts mining Bitcoin. He finds Bitcoin, he pitches it to my family. My dad supported him, and he starts mining the Bitcoin. And through that, we found quite a literal lifeline. And once we saw what it did, it was we were able to transform electricity into freedom money, and then use that money to do the things we needed. That phenomenon went viral. That the activity, the fact that you could basically generate freedom money and use it in a way that you couldn't use the Bolivar or you couldn't use US dollars. When I saw what that did for my friends, my family, and a lot of people in Venezuela, I was instantly sold on the potential of Bitcoin. So what we knew what to do at the time was mine it, because that's how we got started. And through that process, or after that, when I was going to school in Canada and I was working in Canada at the time, most of my family was still back home. So I started a mine in Canada with my best friend Adam, and we found the same issue. We were making Bitcoin, we were earning Bitcoin, but every time we had to pay for things or upgrade our equipment, we ended up having to sell our best performing asset, which always proved to be a bad decision, because every time we tried to rebuy back the Bitcoin, we could never get as much. And we went around looking for financing. We got laughed out of the room by traditional finance. And that was when we realized there was a massive opportunity to create a solution for our problem, which was allowing people to borrow dollars using their Bitcoin as collateral in the same way they use their house, their stocks, their gold, pretty much any other asset. So that was the genesis of Ledn. November 2018, we decided to solve our own problem and bet the house on it, and we built Ledn. And the concept was very simple. We wanted to do a Bitcoin backed loan in the most transparent, simplest way that people could understand. And that's what we built. What started as a solution to our own problems in 2018 has today grown to become the largest retail Bitcoin backed lender in the space, according to the most recent report, which we can get into, which is still, somewhat surreal, but incredibly exciting. And we think we are in a very unique position to take this industry to where we believe it can go in the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's just absolutely fascinating. You went from, I guess, being laughed at by TradFi to now, institutions are lining up to get Bitcoin. So what a way things have changed in such a fast amount of time. But yeah, you alluded to this, and I do want to definitely talk about it because this news kind of very recently just dropped. You guys had a great Q1. You guys are what the second place on Galaxy, or second place in terms of biggest lenders in this space. Can you talk to us about how that kind of came about, how that happened throughout your Q1 process, and kind of how you're going to look to take that momentum, going into the rest of the year?
Yes. So, as you mentioned, the Galaxy report effectively ranks centralized finance lenders in the space. And if you look at the most recent update, which, by the way, shout out to Alex Thorn and the Vibes Capital Management team in Galaxy, but that report effectively ranks you or every lender in CFI, and it includes both institutional and consumer or retail lenders. And if you look at the list, you'll see the number one is Tether, but Tether is an institutional lender. Number two is Ledn, and Ledn is broadly speaking a consumer lending. We deal with retail and businesses as well, publicly listed and private. And so the report effectively shows, and we share our data with the Galaxy team, as do other lenders. And it shows that in the previous iteration of the report, in the Q4 2024 report, we were in the third place behind Tether and Galaxy. In this most recent version of the report, we've bumped up to second place after Tether. And I believe a great deal of the momentum we are seeing is due to the fact that we are the most established or with the longest track record of lending in the industry. We were the first lender to ever do proof of reserves, and we still do them today. We have the longest running proof of reserves program in the space. And we have navigated volatility throughout the 7 years we've been in business. We were here for COVID. We were here for the collapse of the now defunct lenders. And I think when clients are looking for a place to trust with their Bitcoin to get a loan, they're looking at how long have these companies been in the space? What's their track record? How have they navigated volatility previously? And do they have proof of reserve? So we tick all those boxes. And also, I think the momentum we're seeing right now in Q2 is also driven because we continue to what I think is do the right thing, which is focus on what we do best, which is Bitcoin-backed loans. And I'm happy to touch on the most recent announcement we did just around the Vegas conference recently. But Ledn is a dead simple business. It's very easy to understand. We like saying that the best restaurants have the smallest menus, and we want to do one thing and do it better than anyone else, and that is lending dollars backed by Bitcoin. So I think the momentum we're seeing is really just reaping all the seeds that we've planted over the 7 years we've been in business, doing right by our clients, and that's reaping, or we're reaping the rewards today because clients want to deal with a group that's established, that has been there, that's proven, battle tested, and there's no really any other option in this space than Ledn if that's what you're looking for today.
I love to hear that. We'll dive into a little bit on your proof of reserves and kind of that process that goes to showing the transparency, because I think that's the most important in the crypto space, right? We want to know who we're lending our money to, and we want to feel safe in doing so that we won't lose it, especially with all these hacks and all these security concerns going on. So I love that you mentioned that. It's super important. But yeah, let's kind of rewind back a little bit, because I think that report from Galaxy and just all the news that we've been hearing is showing us that, adoption is growing and crypto is maturing. And with that, and, coming from a Venezuela to, a US and all in between, there's going to be an increasing need for access to capital, especially in our crypto world. So can you refresh our memory on how your process works with Bitcoin borrowing and these loans, and where Ledn fits into that whole process?
Definitely. So as I mentioned, and maybe I'll just go in a little bit more detail on how the product works. Ledn lets you use your Bitcoin as collateral to borrow up to 50% of the value of that Bitcoin. And our loans start from as little as $500, and they can go all the way into the multiple millions. So the way the process works is, now Ledn is a licensed and regulated company, so you do have to uh, go through the KYC process when you sign up at Ledn. It's very easy. You just need an ID and a proof of address, and you typically are out on your way in 2 minutes. But once you're approved, you can then go and submit your loan application. So when you're submitting your loan application, you will say, I want to borrow, say $10,000. That will, prompt the corresponding amount of Bitcoin that you need to send to collateralize the loan. And then you'll go and read through the terms and conditions and agree to the terms. Once the loan is approved, you send your Bitcoin over to the loan collateral address, and the funds are typically sent to your bank account within, right now, our average funding time is 9.6 hours. So many clients come in, sign up, apply for a loan, and have the funds in their bank account in one day, depending on the time, really, when they submit the application. But a lot of clients are out on their way in a day. Another important thing about our loans is they do not require monthly interest payments by default. All interest and fees accrue until you decide to repay the loan, which you can do at any time with no penalty. And importantly, as you mentioned around proof of reserves, so two things before I go into proof of reserves. The only type of loan available at Ledn as of July 1st, which this was also part of what we announced, are custody loans. And what custody loans means is that your Bitcoin, while it's collateralizing the loan, sits in custody at all times, whether it's Ledn's custody or one of our funding partners. But the Bitcoin never moves; it stays in a segregated address. And when we pledge that Bitcoin to our funding partners, it is ring fenced and in trust for Ledn. So importantly, that is, again, having such a simple model is what allows us to be so efficient at what we do. And one of the other unique things about Ledn is that we were the first lender to ever do proof of reserves back in 2020. And we did this at the very beginning because we wanted to pour proof of reserves at the foundation level at Ledn, because that would ensure that anything we built beyond that had to fit with our proof of reserves model. Why I believe you don't see as many companies doing proof of reserves today, even though they should and their clients want them, is because it is very difficult to retroactively start doing proof of reserves once you've built dozens of products and support hundreds of assets. And so it's not because they don't want to, it's because many times they can't. But at Ledn, we ensured that proof of reserves was a core part of our business from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think it's just fantastic. So you touched on, the announcement that you made at the Bitcoin conference. Can you expand upon that for some of our members that did not attend? I know a few of our members did attend, and we had a great meetup there. But can you expand on that announcement that you guys made?
Yes, happy to. So we announced just around the conference that as of July 1st, Ledn is going back to its Bitcoin only roots. That means that the only collateral asset available to borrow from or use as collateral at Ledn will be Bitcoin. And we did this because we know how much our clients value focus, and we do too. So there will be no more support for Ethereum across the Ledn platform as of July 1st. And we, like I mentioned, are going back to our Bitcoin only roots. So that's part one of the announcement. Part two of the announcement is that we are transitioning to a custody loan model only, which means the only loans available at Ledn are loans where your Bitcoin collateral sits in custody of either Ledn or one of our funding partners. It does not move. It does not get lent out to generate any interest. And the third part of the announcement is that we are also stopping or sunsetting all Bitcoin yield products. So there will be no more yield products for Bitcoin or lending of Bitcoin at Ledn. We will only be lending dollars and keeping Bitcoin safe. There are a few other ancillary products, but none of those products require any type of lending. So those three things, we believe, simplify our business even more, and simple businesses are easier to understand from clients, regulators, investors, and the way this industry is headed, we like to skate where the puck is going. And we believe that more transparency and more accountability and more proof of reserves is what clients want. More simplicity is what clients want. And that is exactly what we're trying to build here at Ledn.
Yeah, no, I think keeping it simple is definitely, you want to be a master of, one trade instead of, a jack of all trades, master of none, right? Yeah, I do love that process. But you did used to offer ETH loans, and I mean, now you're just strictly doing, Bitcoin loans, and we have seen, a lot ETFs are picking up ETH, and a lot of, institution have interest in ETH. Can you kind of touch on why you decided to move away from ETH and just focus on Bitcoin? I know we want to keep it simple, but were there any other specific reasons that ETH, maybe, well, I guess with all the staking and L2s, did that, like show some type of complexity? What was the reason behind that?
So the reason behind it is there's many reasons, but I'll give you the sort of overarching drivers for this. Number one is our clients love focus, and the more things we try to do, the more complex the business become, the harder it is to understand what we do. So number one is our clients told us loud and clear that they wanted us to focus or continue focusing on Bitcoin. Ledn has been a Bitcoin only company since inception, and we just started supporting Ethereum 2 years ago, largely to help bring the Celsius clients out of bankruptcy. We were working with that team, and a lot of those clients that got impacted by the Celsius bankruptcy were also Ledn clients leading up to the event. And when they saw an opportunity to refinance some of those loans out of bankruptcy, they wanted to do it with us. So they came to us and basically asked us to pitch the bankruptcy process, so the Celsius team and the trustee, for them to be able to refinance their loans with us. In order for them to refinance their loans with us, they needed to go to a lender that accepted both Bitcoin and Ethereum because those were the two assets the court deemed acceptable for the refinancing. So that was one of the big drivers, and we brought them in. Ledn took the lion's share of all that refinancing. A lot of those clients are some of our best clients today, and many of them actually, once they were out, got rid of their Ethereum loans and went fully to Bitcoin. So once after a year of supporting the asset, only 2% of our book was made up of Ethereum. So we decided that we wanted to focus on what our clients really, really overwhelmingly wanted. And the Bitcoin side of the house was growing leaps and bounds ahead of Ethereum. So that would be the number one. And the other thing is, I would say, where the puck is going, right? If you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin does not have native programmability. If you wanted to use any type of decentralized financial service on Bitcoin, you would be forced to wrap that Bitcoin or to stake it or to send it to some type of federation, which comes with its own set of risks. And it's not a native platform for you to do these things. So it adds additional risk. I think this creates a great opportunity for regulated centralized players to step in and offer these financial services on Bitcoin. In the case of Ethereum, Solana, and others, they have these, they have native programmability, they have these smart contracts. And if you're on the risk spectrum far enough that you're okay to deal with assets like that, then you're probably thinking that, you can experiment with those rails. So I think Bitcoin financial services have a big opportunity or present a big opportunity for centralized regulated players like us. And that's the game we want to win. So we want to focus on, again, what we've done since inception and what I think we do better than anyone, which is lend dollars backed by Bitcoin.
Absolutely. So I do want to step back a little bit and kind of tie this into your growth in Q1, bringing you up to number 2 in lending platform. So, I think just in the news and just, with all this volatile price action, I see it in the community, I see it all over X. The markets are seeing a lot of changes, right? Whether that's with the new administration coming in the US and, I guess a lot of crypto bullish talk that we've been hearing, but haven't necessarily been seeing maybe in the price action so much. Definitely maybe in Bitcoin, it did reach all-time highs pretty recently. But with that regulation, those macro shifts, and then also the inflows that we're seeing, how have these conditions impacted your business in particular, and the relationships that you've been developing, whether that be with institutions or just in high net worth individuals, maybe family offices that are coming into your platform?
Yeah, so what I would say is, if I could summarize the sentiment that I've been hearing from our clients since the beginning of the year. It's hard to believe we're already in June, but I think the general line of thinking is that you don't sell Bitcoin, right? And you don't sell your Bitcoin. Why? Because you look at sovereigns, so even sovereign balance sheets like the United States, El Salvador, places like Bhutan, even states within the United States are, passing legislation so that they can hold and create these strategic reserves. So sovereign balance sheets, which are arguably the largest balance sheets in the world, they're holding it, right? So check number one. On the corporate side, you have the ETFs. So now the ETFs have sort of brought Bitcoin into the mainstream and to everybody's retirement accounts. So people are now more familiar with the asset. And you have champions on the corporate side, guys like Larry Fink and Paul Tudor Jones, pushing or telling you that you should own Bitcoin and that they themselves own Bitcoin. So on one end, you have the sovereigns. On the other side, you have professional investors. Some of the most highly regarded investors in the world are telling you should be buying Bitcoin, and they themselves are buying Bitcoin. And then on the corporate balance sheets themselves, you're seeing a sort of Cambrian explosion of these Bitcoin treasury companies who are popularizing this idea of buying Bitcoin with your excess cash and even basically borrowing dollars to buy that Bitcoin or borrowing dollars to keep the Bitcoin and pay for your expenses. So the top balance sheets in the sovereign side are not selling it. The top investors, professional investors in the world are not selling it. They're buying more. Publicly traded companies are buying it hand over fist. And privately listed companies are doing this as well. So these guys come to Ledn oftentimes to a lot of companies, private and public, that operate on a Bitcoin standard and perhaps can't access the bond markets with the ease that a group like MicroStrategy can. They still want to borrow against that Bitcoin. They still want to hold it. So they come to us to get the funding they need and keep the Bitcoin. So I think this idea that Bitcoin is a reserve asset, that government deficits aren't going to stop anytime soon, and that all of this will slowly accrue to Bitcoin over time has really kind of landed on the mainstream. And now that people understand that these Bitcoin-backed loan solutions have been around for 7 years, have worked for 7 years, and they still work today, it's sort of all converging into people really understanding the value prop of this product. And not to mention the fact that if you look at the trajectory of the prices since we've been in business, every person that has used our loans responsibly since the business started has built wealth. And every time you have one of these rallies in Bitcoin, they build even more wealth. And that sort of the ability to build wealth and the dopamine and the excitement that you get from having seen the product work for you is what makes you then go to your friends and tell them to learn about this product. Sometimes, you'll be at a dinner and somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to buy this. I got to close on this house in 2 weeks, and I'm gonna have to go sell some Bitcoin." And the person might overhear you and say, "Don't you dare. Go to Ledn." I had the same thing. And look, I didn't sell my Bitcoin, and now look, I built the wealth around the Bitcoin and I kept the property. So it's a combination of a lot of things happening in the macro world and also reaping the rewards of all the hard work we've done over 7 years.
Yeah, so it seems like I guess we're kind of expecting these loans to become more of a standard in institutional portfolios. And how do you see that actually playing out? And what I guess is that light switch that makes it happen?
I'll give you the perfect example. So, you know the meme or the saying, Bitcoin is pristine collateral, right? And why is Bitcoin pristine collateral? Pristine collateral helps both the borrower and the lender. It benefits both. It makes the lending experience better for everybody. How does Bitcoin do this? Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a borrower, okay? I am a person in Colombia and I am looking for financing solutions. In the emerging world, there are no financing solutions. Like, yes, they exist, but they're extremely limited. If you're a person sitting in Colombia that owns a house, and if you consider just the process of borrowing or getting a HELOC, whether you're in Colombia or in the US, you will have to go to your bank, you'll have to give them all sorts of paperwork, you'll have to wait through like a lengthy week-long process, and you might even get denied because of your income. It won't even be because of the value of the house or the equity you had. It's because banks look at your credit history, your income, and that basically makes that process incredibly cumbersome and challenging for a person, regardless of where they are. With Bitcoin, you can come to Ledn and take a loan and have the cash in your bank account in the same day. So Bitcoin allows you, a person from Colombia, to interface with an international company like Ledn, a world-class company like Ledn that's being used by publicly traded companies in Canada and other places of the world. And you are using a world-class financial service that is perhaps not available locally and that operates faster and more efficiently than your financial services locally. And you get the same interest rates, you get the same terms than a person in Lima or a person in Europe. So it's incredibly inclusive, and it evens the playing field in terms of access to credit, asset-backed, for asset-backed financing across the globe. So it's better for me as a borrower because it opens up more doors. It allows me to do the transactions much faster at with a much fairer treatment. So it gives me equal footing vis-a-vis someone in Europe or different parts of the world, which is incredibly empowering if you're a person in an emerging market. I know this might not resonate so hard for someone in North America or Europe because you guys always have had the best financial services, but for someone that comes from a place like Venezuela, being able to use a product that other people around the world are using with the same ease and at the same terms is a real game changer. And the flip side to the lender, for us at Ledn, why do we think Bitcoin is pristine collateral? Oh my God. So there are so many reasons, but I now at Ledn can say that I can underwrite loans for people, whether they are in Lima or Lisboa or Madrid or Medellin. I'll underwrite your credit in the same speed, in the same process, with the same rates, with the same treatment. That allows me to open up a global market when I'm deploying dollars to lend. Um, there is no other asset that you can lend against that is that global and that equal and that trades 24/7 with deep liquidity, and I can sell a fraction of it if a person defaults. It's really hard when you're lending against real estate to evict somebody if they default, to foreclose a house if they default. It's very costly. Even if you look at an asset like gold, I could not lend against gold in a vault in Switzerland in the way I would lend against gold in a vault in Venezuela. So Bitcoin makes my life easier. It makes my clients' lives easier. And that's why I think it's going to eat and revolutionize the world of asset-backed lending.
I will say I don't think it's just a problem in, the South Americas and, developing nations of the world. I think here in the US and North America, we also kind of feel that problem. It reminds me of a joke I heard from a comedian, an American comedian who said, the bank said I couldn't afford a $1,500 mortgage, so now I'm paying $2,500 in rent. So
And so that's actually so funny you mentioned that, because that is exactly why I think Bitcoin will shift to become the cornerstone of people's portfolios all over the world. Typically, if you look at portfolio compositions up until today for the average American, that means their house, their primary house, and they have a mortgage, which is a massive short position on the dollar. And this is why they built their equity over time, because they took a massive loan from the bank at a wildly unrealistic interest rate of say 2 to 3%, and obviously the debasement of the currency is running at 8 to 10. So you pocket that delta and you're into your equity, and so that grows over time. You go get a HELOC, and that sort of creates this virtuous cycle of you building wealth over time because you owned a hard asset. The challenge with that is that where the world is going, you want to travel more, you want to move more, you don't want to be bound by physical assets. Why would you put your life savings into a property that is much harder to buy, is much harder to sell, it's much harder to get financing for, when you could just buy Bitcoin and you can rent and use your Bitcoin when you need the financing, use your Bitcoin when you need to move around, take it anywhere. It's welcome no matter where you go. It's very easy to move around. So and also it gives you access to faster financing, and I would argue over time even cheaper financing, certainly for people outside of the United States and Europe. So for all these reasons, I think people will start ditching um, things like real estate, or at least stop over indexing into real estate versus Bitcoin. And the same goes for equities and stocks, because they're also more restricted. You can't send around a stock if you want to pay a friend that bought you dinner. You can't pay them with a share of Tesla, but you can send the Bitcoin. You can't pay for a haircut, or you can't buy some, you can go to you cannot go to Steak Shack, or what's the recent company that basically started accepting Bitcoins?
Steak and
Steak
Shake.
and Shake, yeah, Steak and Shake. You can't pay for your burger at Steak and Shake with your shares of Tesla, right? But you can pay with Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin allows you to settle payments. It allows you to access financing. It holds its value in the same way that equities do. So it's such a far superior asset to real estate and equities that I think for all those reasons, people will over time stop over indexing on property and stocks and gravitate more and more and more towards Bitcoin.
Yeah, as someone who was looking for a house, you're speaking music to my ears. So I just love that. So we touched a little bit about how, the Bitcoin loans and these services can be used or should be used in more traditional financial settings. But do you see that future where it is moved to beyond crypto native platforms and introduced in that legacy finance? But more specifically, I want to know like what you think regulatory or infrastructure wise needs to happen to actually make that a reality for us.
Yeah, great question. So, I'm in this industry very deep into the weeds, so people might not have been paying attention to the fact that the SAB 121 ruling was repealed earlier this year. And SAB 121 effectively made it very difficult for banks to interact with Bitcoin because it punished them from a sort of accounting perspective from holding that Bitcoin. So that has now been lifted. And obviously since the Trump administration took over, there's been a massive tailwind for this industry, and they've demonstrated and signaled that they want this industry to grow and thrive in the US. So all these things mean that banks can now participate a little more in this space, or more freely in this space. And not surprisingly, you saw, I believe it was yesterday, the announcement that JP Morgan was considering allowing clients to borrow against their Bitcoin ETFs, which again is the first type of sign that I'm starting to see about these legacy finance entities bringing these products to market. That said, and so I think they won't be the first ones or the last ones. Or sorry, they won't be the last ones. I think you're going to see a lot more of them try to do this because they want to jump on this new wave of the future of finance. That said, I think it will be really interesting for these legacy finance companies to attract the crypto natives and the digital natives, because us crypto natives and the companies that have been built within this ecosystem have been built to operate 24/7, have been built to have global coverage, have been, we've built with the expertise of digital assets and delivering financial services through digital assets. I know it sounds simple, but a Bitcoiner likes to deal with a company that they feel represents their values and is going to stand up for those values. And I know we at Ledn will do that. I don't know that traditional banks will do that because of so many interests or conflicting interests that are going on in these entities. They are so large, with so many competing priorities, that you don't know if they're going to stand up for what you believe is the right thing as a Bitcoiner. And at Ledn, we were built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. There is no other market for us. So we are doing what our clients want. Now, will we be everything for everybody? No, we can't possibly be everything for everybody. There will be other companies to come in and step in and fill those gaps. But I think as far as crypto natives go or Bitcoin natives go, they will have a very hard time interacting with some of these legacy financial institutions.
A company that was born in a certain industry and has stayed true to that from the get-go, right? As opposed to, Jamie Dimon, it seems like just yesterday, he was telling people not to buy Bitcoin and hold it, and that he would fire any of his traders that traded Bitcoin. And now look what they're saying now. So yeah, very interesting how things are changing. So we touched on stable coins, right? And I think that's a narrative that's really, really picking up, right? So I know, and then you guys are, kind of offering products that are tied to stable coins. So can you talk a little bit about how that fits into your overall strategy with Bitcoin loans and how that whole process works?
Definitely. So we have always been, since day one, supporters and big proponents of stablecoins. As a person from Latin America and many Latinos and people from emerging countries in our team, we really understand the value proposition of stablecoins for people outside the United States, primarily. There are benefits if you're in the United States as well, but I think the biggest game changer is how these instruments improve people's lives overseas. And I'll give you an example. When we started issuing loans back in 2018 and 2019, we dispersed in dollars only. And we had clients from places like Venezuela that told us, hey guys, I don't want to get a disbursement into my bank account. I don't trust my local banks. They've let me down many times, and they're all in the hands of the regime. So I would like for you to send me the disbursement in a rail other than dollars. And at the beginning, they started asking us to send the disbursements in Bitcoin, believe it or not. And so they would be putting Bitcoin as collateral, and they were asking for the dollar proceeds of their loan to be converted to Bitcoin and sent to them in Bitcoin. And I asked them, why would you do that? And they told me it's because the Bitcoin P2P markets are very effective here, and I can just convert this Bitcoin into Bolivares at a much better rate than if you were to send me dollars directly to my bank account. And so then from that sort of evolved into people requesting us to disperse the dollar disbursements in stable coins, because once Tether started picking up and stable coins like DAI in the early days in LATAM There were P2P markets for that, and people were accepting these stable coins directly. So there was no need to effectively go through the local banking rails. And I know, people in OECD countries, have this warm, fuzzy feeling when you say the word banks. But in places like Latin America, I joke with my friends that it's kind of like the World Cup. Every 4 years, there's a banking collapse somewhere, and everybody loses all their money. So we have been jaded and trained not to trust the banks. And stablecoins allow you to have dollars in self-custody. Yes, there's other types of oversight, and you could argue that these stablecoins are more regulated, perhaps, and a little more restricted than Bitcoin in some sense. But if you compare that to the alternative, which is using a regime-controlled bank in a country that's basically, making your life impossible, you're going to want to use stablecoins. And the beautiful thing about stablecoins is that you don't need to be wealthy to be able to spin up an address and receive dollars. In the past, whenever there were limitations around using US dollars locally in countries like Venezuela, Argentina, Colombia, that would really affect the guys that didn't have a US denominated bank account in an offshore bank, right? Because the wealthy would always have these, multiple bank accounts all over the place where they could just settle and move money around and bring dollars when they needed to. But if you're a local and your local banks are shut out of any dollar transactions and all you have is cash in a uh, authoritarian environment is very challenging to have because there's a lot of fake bills, there's a lot of fraud down there when you're trying to make a transaction. Stablecoins are really a lifeline to a lot of people in the emerging world. So I am very happy to see that the powers that be in the United States are understanding the potential of supporting stablecoins because it's also in a selfish way helpful to the United States. These guys are desperate. The world is desperate for dollars in a format that is free and fair. And many times, holding dollars at your local bank is neither free nor fair. So, with stablecoins, you can actually do this. And I do believe this is going to cause more and more people to use the dollar or the stable coins because they're going to feel a lot more comfortable doing this. And they will also help the United States not only sort of perpetuate the use of the dollar as a currency globally, but these stable coins are all going out and buying U.S. treasuries, U.S. debt. So it helps the United States in so many levels, and it also helps people in different parts of the world. And what I like the most about stablecoins is that once you understand how powerful and good stablecoins can be, you're just this far from understanding how great Bitcoin is, and the fact that it's better for you to keep your savings in Bitcoin versus a stablecoin. So I think the world we're going to see in the next 5 years is going to be a world where you're spending stables and saving in Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's just very interesting to just see the change in user behavior kind of from that bull run in 2021 where we kind of the world was our oyster and we just thought of so many different products and things to kind of, be able to use crypto with. And it's interesting to see that now while that has happened and crypto has been growing, I think it's interesting to see people going back to, well, you know what? Bitcoin is the king. Let's go back to what, we know and where this all started from. So I'm interested to like hear, what other maybe changes in user behavior you've seen maybe across your platform between, individuals borrowing, like what are they maybe are they using the borrowing for different things now as opposed to what they were in 2021? How is that kind of developed from, I guess last cycle?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing that I will point out just over the years, we started this business in 2018, and in 2019 and 2020, the amount of people that were taking out these loans to buy property was effectively zero. Like not that many people were taking out these loans to buy property. Since Bitcoin has kind of crossed 100K and since the sort of the post ETF rally when we went from 50 to 70 to 100, I've seen a very significant uptick in people coming to us to borrow dollars to buy a house or to buy a property. And I think what that exemplifies to me is that, in the past, you would have needed, when Bitcoin was at $3,000, you would have needed 100 Bitcoin for yeah, 100 Bitcoin for $150,000 down payment, right? Now you need 3 Bitcoins for $150,000. So like all these people that bought and held have seen their wealth grow exponentially to the point where now it's not some rinky-dinky amount that they can use to go pay for a vacation. Now they can actually look at this and say and tell their wives, honey, I know baby number two is coming. I'm buying us a second house. And also I think the demographics of Bitcoiners are such that a lot of us who got into the space, in our sort of late 20s or early 20s are now hitting our mid 30s and early 40s, and that typically aligns with building a family, a growing family, and your need to have that type of security around a place you can call your own, right? And I've seen a pretty significant uptick in people doing this. And I've also seen an uptick in companies, private and public, that are using Ledn or are moving to a Bitcoin standard with their excess cash. And when they need cash, they're not going out and sacrificing the best performing asset. They're coming to Ledn, getting the funding they need to either continue that expansion plan for the business, and then once they get their cash flow back, they'll pay up their loan, release their Bitcoin, and be on their way. So I'm seeing a lot more people buying real estate, and I'm seeing a lot more businesses financing operations with loans, and also entrepreneurs starting businesses or exceeding their businesses by taking our loans and not selling their Bitcoin.
That's just fast. I love to hear that. So, it's kind of speaking of these entrepreneurs that maybe are starting these businesses, people that are maybe, using this to buy homes. And we mentioned kind of, the growth and just the popularity of stable coins in some of these emerging markets. What I want to ask you, like, are there any specific regions, maybe ones that we might not have considered where you guys at Ledn are seeing maybe outsized demand or growth opportunities right now?
Yeah, I mean, maybe surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, there's been a complete renaissance in the United States. Um, the United States has been one of their biggest sort of growth engines year to date. And we've definitely seen a shift in people's behaviors or activity or just even the number of signups and transactions from US clients ever since the ETFs were approved and then increasingly after the election. So, personally, I would love to see the emerging world also come in and sort of jump on the train and understand it. But, I think people discount how important that top-down guidance can be in instilling comfort in you as an investor or in you as a citizen that things are going to be okay. We have your back and we're going to make this thing work in a fair way. Having that reassurance is really helpful for an investor or a person when they no longer feel like they're, doing something that their government may consider hostile or their government may not be happy with. Having that reassurance really allows you, really puts you at ease when it comes to offering financial or accessing financial services or transacting or keeping that Bitcoin for the long term. And so I would love to see more of that from the rest of the world. But to me, it's been frankly, a positive surprise how quickly the United States has turned around their views on this. And not only at the top, but like from what I see in the numbers, how quickly everyone in the country has kind of gone on board with that and gotten more comfortable with the asset class.
Let's just hope that keeps developing. You know, so it seems like AI, right, is a topic of conversation kind of around like everything we do. Like, how is AI going to help? How is AI going to be used for, whatever it is we're thinking about, whether that's like prediction markets, whether that's in DeFi, whether that's in art, right? So can you kind of how can AI, like how will AI be used and, in something like, Bitcoin lending, or is that something you guys are exploring and you see a world where that's going to be prevalent?
So I will tell you, for us at Ledn, we have definitely benefited from AI, but not in the sense of consumer-facing AI products. So we have benefited from AI internally to make our processes more efficient, to make data more readily available, to make consumer information or insights more available to our team. So it's been incredibly. I've been again very pleasantly surprised at how it has impacted our business. Um, I can say today, Ledn is bigger, more profitable, and just overall a better business than we were 3, 4 years ago, and we have half the people. And that's because of AI. Our people are so much more productive because of AI. Sometimes, some data exercises that used to take members of our team a day, we can do them within minutes now. And we have a very cool feature at Ledn, which we call our Ledn's most knowledgeable employee. And if we've created basically a custom GPT for ourselves. And it has anonymized information. It has no personal information from any one of our clients, but it has the transaction details and basically anything you would need to see how the business is doing, our performance metrics, how everything's trending. It gives us insights as to what's happening week over week, what cohorts we're seeing outperform other cohorts. So from a management perspective, it really helps you get real-time data when you're trying to make a decision. And I think it's going to make our team more efficient. It's going to make our processes more efficient. I don't necessarily see a world where AI is part of any of our consumer products yet, but it makes our consumer products better, faster, and more efficient. So even though you might not see it, AI is helping your loan get dispersed faster. AI is helping you get the answers to your questions faster, getting you onboarded faster. So it is helping, but it's sort of behind the scenes when it comes to Ledn.
Hmm. Well, that's good to know that it's definitely helping. So, I have a little bit of a selfish question for you, Mauricio, and I know you're the perfect person to ask this question. So I recently moved back with my parents in New York, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to convince my dad, who's retired, by the way, that Bitcoin isn't just magic internet money. I've been telling him like, hey, you have all this money saved up. I don't know why you haven't been putting it into Bitcoin, but I don't know what it is. Maybe he just doesn't want to listen to me. But what would you say to someone like him who's skeptical, but who is sitting on traditional retirement accounts?
So it depends. The way to orange pill a person has to be tailored to what that person values and appreciates, in my view, just from a sales perspective. And when I talk to the people like my dad or my dad's friends, right? Um, they at least in Venezuela, they really understand the concept of devaluation and debasing of the currency, right? And so when I tell somebody that buying Bitcoin is basically saying when you buy Bitcoin, you're buying a magnet that is going to appreciate every time the government overspends. Instantly in love, right? Because especially now, like look what we just had to go through with the administration. Only we had to go through this massive 6 month wrangle only to land at the fact that we're going to have to run another deficit and print to Valhalla again. And so the reality is like if you understand this, if you understand the implications of governments running deficits to the tune of 8 to 10%. Fed funds is not 8 to 10%. Even your money market accounts won't keep up with inflation. So you can just show math and say, hey, the United States or whoever currency you're under is overspending to the tune of 8%. What do you think that does to the value of the currency? Okay, it drops it by 8%. Great. Okay. How are you getting back that 8% in your investments or your savings? What are your money market funds getting you? 4.5. Okay. What's the compound aggregate growth rate of Bitcoin? 46. So it not only does it keep up with inflation, it outperforms inflation because you have this massive call option of the plethora of extra things that you can do with it other than just having it accrue debasement, right? It's not just the tool. It's not just arguably you could say the S&P 500 accrues debasement, right? At the tune of 8% per year. But you can't pay with an S&P 500 unit. You can't send it to your friends. You can't use it you can use it for collateral, but only if you live in the United States or, a handful of countries. The rest of us are out of luck. But Bitcoin is much more powerful because it can not only give you this debasement shield, but it also opens up a world of extra things you can do with it. And that's where the extra call option comes from. That is not just accruing debasement, it's accruing debasement and it can be the future of money. So you have this or digital gold. However you want to skin that cat, it's up 10x, right? So it's it has a very clear narrative with too many things that can go right for it. And I would argue very few things that can go wrong now that you know, the United States government seems to be gung ho or excited about making it thrive. So now I think the universe of things that would have to go wrong for Bitcoin not to triumph it's a smaller and smaller possibility increasingly. So I would say going long Bitcoin is saying I believe governments will continue to run deficits, and I want no part of that currency that's getting debased.
I love that. I'm gonna show him this interview from the beginning to end right after this. So he's gonna he's from Iran too. So I feel like he's sent money to his family before. So it just you know, I think I'm his son. He just doesn't want to listen to me sometimes. You
You
know.
know, my wife's dad is also called Bijan. My wife's half Persian, so they get it, you know. And I think so. My wife's parents are teachers, and they're not finance people, right? And so it's kind of hard to grasp Bitcoin if you don't really understand the impact of a deficit, right? Like if you don't really understand how money works and the fact that it gets debased every time these guys print it, you just won't be able to get the connection. So I think in order to get Bitcoin, people really need to get where inflation comes from. And sadly, people have been getting gaslit for so long around where inflation comes from, right? If even in places like Venezuela, where we have been ravaged by hyperinflation, you poll 10 people on the street where inflation comes from, and 6 or 7 of them will tell you greedy corporations. And so it's because they've been brainwashed and gaslit for so long. And for these people, you know, you can't just pitch Bitcoin, right? Like you have to start by why the money doesn't work and the fact that it is in corporations. But that is going to go against all the things they're seeing or propaganda they're getting pushed at, and that becomes very difficult. I think the trigger for people like your dad and my family and my wife's family is we have seen money fail us. We have seen the consequences. We have seen corruption. We have seen political games that end up in people getting killed, sadly, or left behind. So it's you know it's money that no one can print or manipulate. That itself should sell the product. You know, should the product would sell itself.
Mm. Yeah, that's home run explanation, I think. Just a matter of they're gonna willing to listen and willing to make that change as well. Uh, very well said. So, you know, to wrap things up, you know, what's next for Ledn? You know, what are, you know, or something that you want to, you know, let us know about Ledn that maybe we didn't touch on in today's conversation.
Um, We're working on a lot of exciting things. I can't necessarily spill the beans right now because we're not the kind to announce an announcement or you know, overpromise and underdeliver. What I can say is we are working to bring clients even more transparency because that's what a simple business allows us to do. Having that simple business allows us to be ever increasingly more transparent. So we're going to build on our foundation of proof of reserves, and we're going to make that even better. We are actively working on making that even better. Um, we know that people would use our loans a lot more if we had lower rates. So we work day and night to get lower rates and offer lower rates for our loans to everyone. And and yeah, I mean, those would be the two main things. There's more things. I mean, the how these things get implemented is also exciting, but I can't really spin too much details on that front. But um, you're gonna see from us more of what you've already accustomed to, which is more transparency, more simplicity, and more accessibility. So more people will be able to access our loans in more ways, and And yeah, that's what I can say for now. But I'll be back when we're ready to drop the news.
We can't wait to have you back for that. And for those of you tuning in as well, you can explore, more at Ledn, more about Ledn and their lending business at Ledn, Ledn.io. They have some blogs on the website as well that you can read through and really just dive into, what you guys are doing, which I think is fantastic. So Mauricio, it's been always a pleasure to have you on. Your insights really help make sense of this fast moving space, and I love kind of the way you break things down in simple terms for degens like me that don't have much experience with lending. So just been great having you on, and can't wait to have you back next time.
Hey, always a pleasure, guys. I'll come back shortly with more fun things to share.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, this has been another Real Vision Masterclass with Ledn. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.